Africa Science Dialogue, closing the gap between science and society.
Back to the Africa Science Dialogue podcast. Welcome again, and today I have another yet more interesting scientist with me in studio. Caroline Tecker, an environmental specialist with over 2 decades of experience in Malawi's environment sector, working extensively with both the government of Malawi and international organizations, including United Nations Environmental Programme, the Global Environment Facility, and the Global Framework on Chemicals. She currently serves as Malawi's national focal point for several international conventions, including the Global Framework on Chemicals, the Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. Her work focuses on chemicals and waste management and their broader social and environmental impacts. She served in several places, which we will talk about a little later, but first and foremost, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
It's Malawi's election year. We won't go much into details, and I know, of course, the public is excited about that.
Yeah.
We go directly to what you do, chemicals and waste management. Mm-hmm. I have asked someone this question before this same podcast. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like waste management problem is a problem to manage or to eradicate?
I think it's there to be managed, because as long as we live, we'll always generate waste. Mm-hmm. So it's something that we can manage, and if we actually took time to see areas where we could minimize the amount of waste that's generated in the first place, we won't be having this conversation. Yeah.
I come from a place where, and I'm sorry if my people are watching, we finished drinking from plastic bottles and haul them out of car windows, and at some point I saw that we are releasing up to, is it 500 million metric tons of plastic a year? A lot of wastage. How do you get to communities to tell them, to alert them, to make them like share in your belief or in your ideology of not like themselves propagating this waste knowingly?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, and depending on where you come from, the plastic bottles could be a resource or they could be a waste. I'll give an example from Malawi. So in Malawi, the plastic bottles are a resource, especially for poorer communities where they're probably brewing traditional drinks and they've got no receptacles for that drink. So the plastic bottles, as much as you've used them as a first user, for them it's a means of packaging their drink. But then obviously after 2, 3, 4 times of reusing, it becomes waste, and that's where the problem is. So if we could change the mindset, which I think is now the missing gap in the discussion of waste, if we could change the mindset to think that, yes, I'm using this for now and maybe for the next 2 or 3 cycles, how does this eventually end up being a problem that will generally come back to me? And once we get to that, I think that's where the thinking will change, and also maybe behavior will also change. That's what I think.
Thinking of the different social structures or the different stratas in society, like you said, some of these materials that some people see as waste, probably somebody will need to collect them. They feel like there is value from there. There are people who are actually actively trying to collect this litter also to go and sell to people who will be recycling them. Is there any universal message that you can pass so that somebody who really throws out that waste feeling that it doesn't benefit them, and somebody who probably holds on to the waste, all are on a common like level reasoning, and they all see it for what it is? It can be beneficial, it could be waste. Like, how do you get communities kind of resonating with you to be very conscious of the fact that when I'm doing this, it could be affecting somebody else, it will come back to me? And shortly we'll go to One Health, because I have a similar question on One Health.
Yeah, it's very difficult, but what I've realized is sometimes we need to hear from them. I think for the longest of times we've been telling them what these things could do or what these things could end up doing. but I think it's high time we started listening from them. And talking about plastic pollution, it is only now, and I'm sure it's something that was there, it's only that maybe it wasn't documented, is that the communities are fighting back to say we don't want plastic because it's killed my animal, it's killed my goat, it's killed my chicken, or even fish. And once we start listening from them, will we be able to look at the problem of waste, and in this case plastic, as a problem that doesn't really need us scientists talking to them, but them giving us, telling the story in a way that they understand and know how best to solve the problem. So I think now we need to listen from the communities. They should tell us what is working, what is not working, and maybe that is the best way to deal with issues of pollution, in this case plastics.
I came straight to you with plastics, I'm sorry, just went into
No,
plastics.
it's fine.
Your work focuses on chemicals and waste management and the broader social and environmental impacts. For somebody who probably would see that statement and wonder exactly what that is, what you do, how will you break it down?
Okay, so I'm a regulator. Ideally, what happens is when someone is going into the waste management area or sector, as well as maybe in the chemical sector, we help in issuing licenses for different aspects of whatever they want to do from an environment point of view. So using the legal framework that we have, we're able to provide guidance and advice on how that can be managed. But then obviously the issues of waste at the end of those activities is what is also very interesting for me, because then I always I'm able to provide guidance if possible on how they can manage waste after they've been able to do the activities that they were licensed for. So it's a regulator point of view, but also just understanding the impacts of those activities in whatever form they come in, and how they impact human beings and the environment, and maybe consequential effects to human health.
And in your line of duty, definitely, I think you will have to monitor once these people...
Oh, yes, definitely.
So what are some of the main challenges you have in monitoring?
I think the biggest challenge is sometimes when people come for licenses, they're just doing that because they need to tick a box. They don't actually understand why they're being licensed.
It's just a requirement.
It's just a requirement. And then when you follow up now to see if they're actually doing what they said they'd do when they initially applied for the license, and maybe you get to points where you're fining them or closing them down, that's when they're like, but I didn't know this, but. And then that's the challenge that you have, where people there's a disconnect between what they're doing with what they were licensed for. And then when you come in as a regulator to tell them that you're actually not doing what we asked or we expected you to do, they feign ignorance or outright they're arrogant and said, but I've got this should allow me to do certain things. And yet they don't know that they're limited even with that license that they have. Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Should you deal with that by even cracking down on them harder, or do you need to bring them into, to discussions and everything?
Yeah.
Because you've actually said that they feign, in some instances, people feign ignorance because they want to get away with something they know, obviously.
Yeah.
How best to deal with such situations?
Yeah, so with the amount of experience that I have, I don't think more fines help. You really need to get them to your side to understand your point of view, and that is a long-term thing. It's easier just to punish someone. You've been found guilty of this. Here's a fine. They won't get the message that you really want to get. But if you teach them, you advise them, you educate them, I think they'll even be more advocates for your cause than it would if you were just to punish them. So for now, I think from a regulator point of view, while I understand the importance of punishments and so on, my angle to handling things is more to bring them to an understanding of why you have what you have and what you're trying to gain at the end of the day. Yeah.
And in the concept of One Health, when we think pollution, we think about my breathing problems. But I'm talking from a layman point of view, my breathing problems and such issues. How can you show society that by doing that they are hurting more than just themselves? They could hurt their livestock could suffer in the process. Their farms are going to suffer. The environments. How does the whole One Health approach come in your work?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting aspect because from an environmental point of view, people tend to relate more to human and animal health because maybe it's something that they easily associate with. If someone says he's sick, you can actually tell they're sick, or there'll be symptoms that will show that they're sick. And the same relates to the an animal. But if we say the environment is sick, in this case, let's say the land or the water is sick, the effects of environment being sick, as it were, don't show up immediately. You might pollute something today, but you only get the effects in the long term. And just because people don't actually see the effects at that point, the environment pillar tends to be a forgotten issue. And it's only when something happens 5-10 years down the line that people are able to relate it to something that was done maybe 5 years prior to that. So from a One Health point of view, and that's also one of the things that I was trying to bring across when we were talking earlier, is that environment is just as important as human health, it's just as important as animal health. Why? Because it's the cradle that carries both the animals and the humans. But because it doesn't speak, it doesn't cry the way we think or see the other to cry or make noise, it's something that is almost like an afterthought. And my coming here and my noise in the One Health space is to say, look, you're actually overlooking the very cradle that is holding us all. We should also be caring about what is the environment, because it does speak, but only in ways that probably we are yet to get to a point of actually seeing and understanding. Yeah. So if we could use an example, let's say, of climate change. Climate change is something that now is the buzzword. Why? Because we've seen it, the effects rather. We see droughts, greenhouse gases, melting of ices in the Arctic, and so on and so forth. But if we were to be talking about climate change, let's say 20 years ago, it was something that people didn't even think it would happen. But now it has impacts on human health. It does have impacts on animal health. And that's what I meant, that the effects of something that happens to the environment takes a long time to show itself, but when it does, everybody sits back and says, hey, it is because of those activities that we did maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah. I would wonder, for example, like I remember in the United Nations, I think, Conference of Parties, COP26 in 2021, a whole discussion that was about how near we are to surpassing the temperature limits that we have set. We shouldn't be above 1.5 degrees, above pre-industrial level temperatures and all that. But these are things that have been projected since so long ago. If you do an interpolation, by next year you might be getting to this. It's dangerous, so let's close down these coal mines, whatever. Do you think, and then we don't do it, so we start running when it's too late? The whole climate change story has been there for so long, yet people continue to resist some of the things that will mitigate. Do you feel like governments, and this could be hard political questions, probably don't prioritize this soon enough or well enough, or probably it's not among their priorities, pollution and stuff like that. So the things they're thinking about is the next election, the things they're thinking about is the very short-term goals, some superficial stuff. Do you feel like we have the information, we don't want to act, we just want to be reactive, not proactive?
Interesting question. It could be a yes and a no. Yes, because like I said, environmental effects are long term.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see them immediately. But no could be because we're not seeing the effects now. So you want to deal with the problem now.
Mm-hmm.
People say they're hungry now. You're going to put your money into something that people can see now.
Is it how you should do it?
I don't know how. I'm just saying it because I'm not sure
Okay.
how government machinery actually thinks, because
Okay.
there's a think tank behind all these things, right? But if you ask me from a scientist point of view, I think we're always reactive, and that's the sad part about it. And unfortunately, that's the reality, and it's not just from Malawi. I think mostly that's how governments work. They'll rather deal with a problem that is seen and happening now, and will only deal with that when it actually becomes a problem, I suppose, at that moment. So that's where it is. And then the other issue, obviously, is about competing needs and resources. We've got very few resources. What should be managed at this point in time? And yes, climate change is real, but is it really, really important now versus people want food now or want medicine now? So I think that's where the juggling part comes in.
Yeah, because I think that's a very, very delicate balance. And for governments, which, and I'm thinking for governments here, they have their own goals,
Yes.
of course, the manifestos, but also personal
Yes.
goals. After 5 or whatever number of years I want to be back in office. Do you feel like you get capacitated enough? And do you feel like you have enough human resource and enough like financial resources? And if not, do you think there's some support that you feel should be coming from some other quarters that's not coming? You're pointing fingers here.
Yeah, no, I don't think resources will ever be enough, and I don't think there's enough capacity.
Okay.
So there's always room for improvement. But what I think we should be thinking, and I'm talking now from an African point of view, we should start talking among each other. We should stop relying on donors to do certain things for us, because amongst ourselves we've got enough resources, amongst ourselves we've got enough capacity, amongst ourselves we've got enough to go around, but we keep on looking to the global south for something. And then when that doesn't happen, that's when we start screaming. But assuming we sat down and said, look, enough is enough. We have enough scientists, we have enough resources, and everything else that we have, enough to go around to be shared. If we start having that conversation, I believe that will be, some of these problems will be problems of the past.
But most of our experts want to go to Europe for different reasons. Probably they don't feel very comfortable coming back home. The government is not giving enough. In research, for example, like in research alone, do you feel like there is more that can be given by governments, can be allocated? Because yes, they are competing needs, but then these are long-term goals that, and you will continue dishing out resources for the short term, for the emergent problems, if you don't deal with it in a more structured way in the long term. So do you feel like, for example, I don't know if we are avoiding this, the governments, we need to push them a little more to put more money into research, looking into the long term. Because I feel like the research, you say the scientists are there, but then some of these scientists have to flee because they don't feel like they're supported well enough. So we cannot probably really have adequate capacity, adequate human resource, crafting solutions for, you get what I mean, like homemade solutions. But they have grown here. They have to go outside to where they feel supported. So probably briefly, if you feel like governments can somehow squeeze themselves and do more, or if scientists can show them more reasons to do that.
In fact, that's where I was going to ask. I was going to give my response to say that maybe it's high time we also showed what we're doing and why we need more resources. Because as long as we are in the lab and we are not actually producing results to show to government, I mean, how do you expect them to see the need for them to give more money? So I think this symposium has actually opened my mind to how very nice research is going on, but we're not giving it to the people who actually need to fund us. So we're going to do a research for, I don't know, somebody in the global south, and that's where your money is. But you want money from your government and they don't know what you're doing, they don't know the results. How do you expect to get money? So like I said, we need to be talking to the people who actually matter more. And these are our governments. We need to show why we need money from them. We need to show why we need more resources, whether it's the research facilities or grants or whatever it is, so that they also understand and appreciate why we need what we need.
Are these governments willing to listen?
I think they are.
Okay.
I think they are. It's just that we need to know also how to package our message. Because they've got short-term span in
Yes.
terms of listening to what we want to say.
Yes.
But we should put it in a way that it will be able to get the message across in the shortest time possible, and also for them to relate to them and to what they're also trying to achieve
Okay.
in the 5-year span or however long you're talking about.
Okay. From your profile, you also played a leading role in biosafety, including spearheading the first GMO trials in Malawi. Now, about that, the resistance that comes with that kind of technology, and especially when it's biotechnology in this case, did you get a lot of resistance coming from misinformation and disinformation? How did you deal with it?
Yes, as you can imagine, biotechnology, especially GMOs, people have all sorts of ideas. And for us, even just to get to the trial stage, it was really hard because people were asking, I need to go for a PhD for 6 years for me to understand this, and until I come back, that's when probably I'll be able to swing my department or my ministry to actually to give a yes. And we're like, look, this is an experiment, and experiments go either way. It could be a yes, it could be a no. And until we actually say, let's try it, we'll not be able to do that. So it doesn't necessarily need one to go for a PhD or whatnot. And it took us about between 4 to 6 years just to get them to actually accept that it's a research that we're trying to do. So once the trial started, the committee that advises government on whether the technology is safe or not, I remember taking them to the field to see this gem, and they're like, so it's just cotton? We're like, yes, it's just cotton. They're like, you should have told us 6 years ago that all you wanted was a trial. So the seeing and believing part, very, very crucial. Then we ended up taking journalists and so on so that they could actually spread the message. But to get them to that point was the hardest part. But once that was done, it was easier for members to actually say, these are just trials. And like I said, trials will either go yes or no. It's the trials that speak. And that's what made things easier. But the hardest part was the them to accepting to actually do the trials, because they're like, oh, it's going to affect surrounding fields and all these other things that come with the GM technology. Misinformation, or is it disinformation? Yeah, that was the difficult part, because I remember, I'll give you one example. The trial managers went out to buy PPE, and they bought red gloves. And already that was a negative message, because why are the gloves red? It means this is very dangerous. You know what I mean? So it was things as like those that at the beginning, or even when the person was buying, I think they didn't even think what the color would mean. But when it was brought, and everybody was like, oh. So you needed to explain everything that you did, and had to take a think back on what would this mean for someone who's actually not understanding this. But it was a good experience, and for the other trial that came after that, it was much easier, because the biggest issue had been clarified, and it was easier to get on with the trials for banana and cowpea. Yes.
I would also be very scared if you have to hold white cotton using red gloves. It would be very weird for me.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm a misinformer, I'm a pseudo-intellectual. I don't like what Eka says, so I have to find a way of, and probably I'm a commercial activist, I'm making money. I will use my social as much as possible to reach as many people as possible so they can follow my bandwagon. And of course, those things are very, very exciting. I think people just love stories that don't amount to much. And they have nothing to lose either way.
Yeah.
So when this comes on social media, how do you, as a scientist, as a regulator, as somebody who has seen it rejected, even knowing the impact it's going to have on the people for so long, and understanding the kind of dangers we will face in the future with climate change and everything if we don't adapt to this, how do you deal with the social media kind of flurry of misinformation, disinformation?
Yeah, no, that's a difficult one. And talking from someone who's in the government, you can appreciate the protocols that we have to go through. So ideally for us, we won't be able to respond as quickly as social media would demand, I suppose, because the social media would only take a tweet or a post for it to go out. But for us, we usually use the traditional methods of sitting down, setting a paper. It goes through certain levels of clearance, I suppose, for it to be deemed ready for the market or for the consumption of the people. So I think it's high time that, especially from a scientific point of view, that we got to a stage where we'll be able to maybe not respond as quickly and as fast as social media demands, but at least in a quick manner that can allay those fears or maybe defray the damage that has probably been caused by what has been done. But I think science has got some pulling up of socks to do so that it actually matches the energy that social media has. And unfortunately, I don't know fellow scientists in other fields that are not, that are not within the government sector, how they respond. But unfortunately for scientists in government, you just have to follow protocol. And until we get to a point where maybe we can have some of these red tapes removed, will we be able to match that energy? Yeah.
And as an individual, are you able to do that?
Yes, and maybe this is where we're missing out as scientists, where we feel that our job just ends where we are. We cannot communicate what we know using social media, and I think it's a very important tool to use to get information out there. And maybe we shouldn't just start from hitting back. We should probably set the scene. And this workshop has taught me that I should actually use social media more in terms of disseminating information that is important for the public. Because that way, should anyone come up with something negative, for example, from the example that you gave, people will be able to trust me to actually say, no, but let's wait to hear from Carol. What is she going to say on the subject matter? Yeah.
Are you on social media?
I am, but
not very active.
Not very active.
It's a call for you to be very active.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so.
As we wind up, do you have any parting shot, like a call for scientists to do something, to get on social media? Because you really need to.
We should get on social media, but I think whatever we do, it's science related.
Okay.
Everything that we do is science related, and therefore the call is, what can you do to make your world a better place? I think that's the last message that I'd say.
That was the second last message, because I also want you to look into that camera and tell a young girl somewhere who probably has a dream of making it in science amid all the problems that there is, fewer women in STEM, lack of opportunities, to push on.
So to the young girl or young scientist that's listening to me, science is a very interesting place to be. It's got lots of opportunities, but also you get to be the only one in a male-dominated area. But that's where the challenge is, because science is a challenge. The message is keep pushing, keep moving, because there's so much to be discovered out there.
Thank you very much, Carol, for coming onto this podcast. Definitely, we spoke around a time when the elections in Malawi, there's that election mode, the whole election mode, and conference, the ABBC conference as well, on miscommunication and misinformation and disinformation. But as you realize, much as we have a long way to go, we have to appreciate the steps that we have made so far. And we have also to appreciate that the damage that we inflict on the environment comes back to us, goes to livestock that we so much love, is like the One Health concept is something we need to think much about, not only for our own protection, but for our environment, for livestock out there. And there are people who are very, very determined to make sure that we do not slacken in this push to reduce environmental pollution. She is one who is doing a very good job in that. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for joining us, Carol. And see you next time. This is the Africa Science Dialogue.
Africa Science Dialogue, closing the gap between science and society.